Corporate rooftop event. 50-story view of the city at dusk. Then a body hits the floor. The tech investor's wife had just collapsed mid-toast, her champagne glass shattering across the marble, and the paramedics were locked in traffic 11 floors below. 40 guests in evening wear stood frozen in a circle around her, and the only person who moved was a girl nobody had let past the service elevator all night. Corporate rooftop event. 50-story view of the city at dusk. Then a body hits the floor. The tech investor's wife had just collapsed mid-toast, her champagne glass shattering across the marble, and the paramedics were locked in traffic 11 floors below. 40 guests in evening wear stood frozen in a circle around her, and the only person who moved was a girl nobody had let past the service elevator all night. Her name was Nora. She had been without a fixed home for almost a year, moving between a youth shelter that filled up by 6 p.m. and whatever quiet corner of the city let her sleep undisturbed until morning. In her backpack, she carried 3 things: a folded photograph of her older brother, a stub of pencil worn down to nothing, and a paperback anatomy guide missing its back cover. Salvaged from a library discard bin 2 winters ago and read so many times the pages had gone soft at the corners. Nora had been fascinated by the human body since she was 7, since the night her brother's asthma attack turned into something worse and a paramedic knelt over him in their kitchen with hands that seemed to know exactly what the body needed before the body itself did. She decided that night that she wanted to understand what those hands understood. Without a school she could count on, without a library card that survived 2 address changes, she read whatever crossed her path. Torn health pamphlets from free clinics, a first responder manual left behind on a bus seat, that soft-paged anatomy guide, which explained, in a chapter on cardiac events, exactly what a stroke looked like in its first 90 seconds, and exactly what needed to happen before those seconds ran out. She had read that chapter more times than she could count. She never imagined she would need it on a Tuesday in November. Sitting on the concrete steps outside a glass office tower, eating half a sandwich saved from the shelter's dinner service, watching well-dressed people flow in and out of a lobby that never once let her past the doors. She noticed the caterers first, then the elevator opening on the top floor visible through the tower's glass face. Then, through the window, a woman in a green dress sinking slowly to the floor while everyone around her simply stood there. Nora did not know why she stood up. She just did. She slipped through the loading entrance behind a delivery cart, found the service elevator, and rode it to the roof, following the sound of raised voices through a door that swung shut behind caterers still rushing out with trays in their hands. She stepped into a room where a woman lay on marble, one side of her face slack, her husband kneeling beside her, repeating her name as though volume alone could fix what was happening. His name was Desmond Okafor Reyes, founder of one of the largest venture funds on the East Coast, a man who had spent 25 years solving problems by writing checks large enough to make them disappear. In that moment, on that rooftop, none of it mattered. He was simply a man watching his wife's face change shape in front of him, utterly unable to do anything about it. Then a girl with a backpack knelt down on the other side of her. Nora had noticed something the second she walked in. The way one side of the woman's mouth had dropped, the way her right arm had gone slack against the floor, while her left hand still gripped weakly at the air. She did not stop to explain herself. She did not ask permission. She reached into her bag, pulled the worn anatomy guide free, and set it open beside her only long enough to confirm what she already knew, then let it fall shut. She turned the woman gently onto her side, checked that her airway was clear, and began speaking to her in a low, steady voice, asking her to squeeze her hand, asking her to smile, timing everything with a focus that made the room go quiet in a way it hadn't been since the woman first fell. A security guard reached for Nora's shoulder to pull her back. Desmond, without looking away from his wife's face, said only, "Let her." Nora kept talking, kept the woman's head positioned exactly right, kept counting seconds under her breath the way the book had taught her, marking the exact time the symptoms began, because she knew the number of minutes would matter. When the elevator doors finally opened and 2 EMTs rushed out, Nora stepped back immediately, gave them the exact time of onset down to the minute, described the exact symptoms in the exact order they appeared, and then quietly picked her backpack up off the marble floor and turned to leave. as though what she had just done was nothing more than an ordinary Tuesday. Desmond caught up to her at the service elevator before the doors closed, because what Nora did on that rooftop is the most visible part of this story. But we believe there was a quiet chain of kindness that made it possible long before that night. 3 years earlier, a retired school librarian named Winifred had started leaving a small stack of donated books outside a youth shelter every Friday morning, never checking who took them, simply believing that no child should go without something to read. Nora took a book from that stack almost every week for 2 years. A former paramedic named Simon, who now ran a hardware store 2 blocks from the shelter, spent his lunch break on the first Wednesday of every month teaching a free basic first aid class in the back room, open to anyone who wandered in, no questions about address or income ever asked. Nora attended 4 of those sessions before she turned 10. Simon never learned her last name, and a shelter overnight worker named Priya let Nora stay in the reading corner an extra half hour after lights out on the coldest nights, never writing it in the log, simply leaving the lamp on. None of them were on that rooftop. All of them were. Winifred's Friday books, Simon's Wednesday lessons, Priya's extra half hour of lamplight. They all arrived in that room the moment Nora's hands moved with certainty. This is what we believe. No small kindness is ever wasted. It travels quietly for years, waiting for the exact second it is needed most. Desmond found Nora sitting on the curb outside the building an hour later, waiting for the shelter's doors to reopen for the evening. He sat down next to her without a word of pity, without the discomfort some people carry when poverty sits close enough to touch. He asked her 2 questions only. What did she want to do with her life, and what was standing in her way? Nora answered both honestly. What followed was not charity, and Desmond was careful about that distinction from the very first conversation, because he had learned in 25 years of building things that the rarest asset in any room is a person who already knows exactly what they are capable of and simply needs the obstacles cleared. Within a month, Nora was enrolled in school under a guardianship Desmond's foundation arranged through a family who had fostered for over a decade, a loud, warm household where the porch light stayed on because someone was always still awake. She was given a tutor twice a week and a library card that never expired for lack of an address. She asked only to keep her anatomy guide, back cover missing and all. Nobody ever suggested she shouldn't. 3 years later, Nora was the top student in her school's science program and had spoken, at 13, on a hospital panel about early stroke recognition, describing symptoms with a precision one attending physician later called sharper than most second-year residents. Desmond's wife, fully recovered, still calls her by the nickname their daughter gave her, one that roughly translates to the one who stayed, because when the room emptied of everyone useful, Nora had stayed. The night before her first day of high school, Nora sat at her new kitchen table and wrote 3 letters, not to Desmond, not to the doctors who praised her, but to Winifred, to Simon, and to Priya, tracing each of them down through the shelter's old records to tell them exactly what their small, unremarkable Fridays and Wednesdays and quiet extra half hours had made possible. Winifred wrote back within the week, saying she hadn't thought about that stack of donated books in years, and had cried reading the letter twice before calling her son to read it a 3rd time. Simon kept his letter taped inside the register at the hardware store, where it still is. Priya never wrote back, but a shelter coordinator told Nora months later that Priya had framed it and hung it beside the lamp she still leaves on for whoever is still reading past lights out. Never count a person out because of where they slept last night. Never assume that having nothing means knowing nothing. And never forget that the knowledge which saves a life might live in a book with no back cover, carried by someone the room never thought to look at twice. Thank you for joining just a moment. We're so glad you're here.